Yeah, VMworld, Virtual Machine World.
Yeah, well, it's VM. It's a, yes. It was a conference here in San Francisco, and a lot of vendors came out. VMs really changed the face of IT.
Yeah.
Beforehand, if you wanted to have a bunch of servers, you actually had to have physically different server boxes.
Right.
What VMs allowed us to do was to have virtual machines that we could spin up on a very robust hardware platform,
right,
and have servers as we need them to just dynamically get loaded. Well, there's been a little bit of a wrinkle to that, and it's actually called containers, believe it or not. And it's actually the same idea of what we just talked about, the ability to pack everything you need for a particular service, a particular application, into one container, and then move it from one place to the next. One spot, one operating system, one platform, without ever really having to worry about things that you're bringing with you.
Right. The two big things I gleaned from going to VMworld was that storage was a big deal, and the Docker. Just Docker
yeah,
in general.
Well, you know, I thought maybe we should hear a primer on Docker, so we went over to our friends at Synology and, well, had a little chat. Virtualization used to be the king of getting the most out of your existing infrastructure, but then containers came along, specifically Docker. Docker took something that's been around for decades and, well, made it accessible to everyone. To explain what that accessibility means, I'm here with Andy D. Laverne from Synology, who's going to give us a primer on what a container is. Andy, a lot of people think of container and they think, oh, that's just virtualization. But that's not really what it is. What separates something like Docker from something like VMware?
Sure. So Docker is a lighter weight version of doing virtualization. So it's more application oriented rather than being something that virtualizes an entire machine. So in this case, we've taken Docker, turned it into a package that you can install right on your NAS. It's very quick and simple. And you can use it to run new applications that you maybe wouldn't have been able to before on your Synology NAS.
What can I run inside of a container? Is it everything that I can run inside a virtual machine?
Not necessarily. So you wouldn't be able to run a Windows application, for example. It's going to be something more that's Linux-based. So, for example, if you've got a Linux distribution of Plex, or if you've got a Linux distribution of a Minecraft server, you could potentially do that in Docker.
One of the other things that I don't think a lot of people understand is the efficiency in which containers will run. If I have a virtual machine, I can run one server in that virtual machine. I can run many virtual machines, but it's still limited to one server per virtual machine. If I'm running a container like Docker, I can take multiple services and drop them on the same machine because of the way that it works. Why is that? Why do I get so much more efficiency using Docker versus something a little heavier weight?
Sure. It's mostly because you don't have the hypervisor layer that a virtual machine would typically carry. So it just reduces a lot of the overhead of running a container compared to a virtual machine. So, for example, if you run a package directly off the NAS, for example, Plex, that's going to be something more like 100 megabytes of storage and 40 megabytes of memory. You move it into Docker, you're looking at about the same amount of memory, but more storage, and then you bring it into a virtual machine, and you're not only taking more memory, but you're also taking additional storage for that.
I'm glad that you brought up the hypervisor, because one of the issues that's starting to surface with those who are really into Docker is what it means for security. Without the hypervisor, with so many services running on the same OS, is there more of a risk that I can start to leak security concerns from one container to the next and to the next?
That's something that Docker's still working on to an extent. They're putting a lot of different things into the basis of what a container is. So they're adding a container component that's a plugin, and that's going to let you manage the network of your Docker containers. So you could have a completely separate network layout for your containers compared to what your actual server environment is. So you could do things like set up a separate VLAN that doesn't exist in your network. You could set up a mesh topology that doesn't exist within your network, and that can all be done within Docker. But for now, it's still fairly secure. You can control whether containers talk out to other containers. You can control which ports are open to the outside world as well.
Let's get down to brass tacks. What do I need? If I'm running, say, a Soho, what do I need to get started with containers?
All right. In terms of going with Synology NAS, you're looking at as small as a 2-bay unit on the 713 Plus, so we're able to start running Docker on that unit, and pretty much anything with an Intel base. So a lot of our systems on our Plus lineup will be Docker capable.
What model is this?
This is a DS1515 Plus. This is an Atom-based system. It has 4 network interfaces on the back, and you can put up to 8 terabyte disks in each of these bays. So it's a system that you can use for a small or medium business and at home as well.
We have played with one of these. It's fantastically powerful, incredibly fast, but one of the added benefits is I can run Docker containers on it. Can you show me how that works?
Sure, absolutely. So this is the Docker interface as it exists in DSM. So this is just a package that you would go into Package Center and install. You type in Docker right here, you'd get an install button, and you're good to go. Once Docker's up and running, you'll get this window. Now, from within this window, you can take an overview of what Docker containers you already have, but let's say you don't have any to start with. So if you're using traditional Docker, it's going to be a command line experience. So you're looking at having to determine which of your images you're going to use, find the name of it. You can't really check the resource utilization of them very easily, and it's a little cumbersome to add new containers. But when you're using our interface, you can just go into the registry, type in something that you want, like Plex, for example, and then you can just right-click and say, download this image. Once your images are downloaded, you'll just have them in a library here. And let's say I wanted to just run a new instance of Ubuntu. I could just click on here, hit launch, name it Ubuntu example, and I can choose to put a resource limitation on it if I want and add a shortcut to this particular container onto my desktop. We'll just go ahead and say run the container after the wizard finishes. And then just like that, Ubuntu example is up and running. So if I want to access this, I can hit details. And this will show me a little overview of how long it's been up. If there's any services running inside of the container, it'll tell me which ports it's using. I can also check processes that it might be using. But I can also access the container directly from here. So now I have a terminal window, and let's say I wanted to install something through Ubuntu. I can just go apt-get install. But if you do have something running, for example, I've got a NoVNC installation of Ubuntu going. I can go in here, check which port it's running on. And so this is on 32.769. And I'll switch to this other tab here, which is running on the same server on 32.769. And this is basically a full Ubuntu desktop running in a browser. So this is just one example of one of the ways that you can use a Docker in your home environment or in business to run whatever applications you want.